welcome inaugural episode of Back to the Batcave, revisiting the animated series. I'm your host, Adam, and with me is my co-host, Josh. Josh, how's it going?
It's going great, Adam. Good to be with you.
It's good to have you here. This is a companion vidcast podcast. Well, you're going to get both formats, so enjoy it however you choose. It's a companion piece to the Multiverse Musings vidcast. Originally, we had planned to cover this as part of just the regular vidcast, but it kept getting lost in the shuffle because apparently DC's got a lot of news and they keep throwing news at us and there's lots to cover. So I said, all right, this show has to be its own separate thing, and I want to cover the animated universe all in of itself. And we've wanted to get Josh on for the longest time. We've had discussions back and forth, and I said, you know what? I know Josh loves Batman the Animated Series, and I think he's the perfect guy to revisit this show with. And then also, in addition to this show, Steven and I are going to cover Superman the Animated Series in the same manner. I haven't exactly come up with the name for that one yet. That's pending. Not patent pending because it's not our property, so we can't say that. And then, in addition to Superman the Animated Series, we're going to cover Justice League and so on and so forth. So lots of stuff, and there's going to be crossover episodes, all the good stuff. Nick Fury's not the only one who can cross over, folks. So, good stuff. But yeah, Josh, it's a pleasure to finally get you on the show. And so, Batman the Animated Series is a classic. I mean, I'm hard pressed to find somebody who hasn't seen it, and
especially in people from our generation.
Yeah, and I'm even more hard pressed to find somebody that doesn't like it. If I find said person, I'm going to send them for counseling because it just isn't right. No, I'm kidding. Opinions are your own. You can enjoy what you enjoy. Don't like what you don't like. But no. Just before we get into the episodes we're going to cover tonight and how we're going to revisit the series, Josh, tell me a little bit about your origin with the series. So how did you come across it? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I actually talked a little bit about this. I came to a different sort of conclusion. It was more about how I got into comics. But really, the origins of everything of my Batman fandom come from watching the 1966 Batman live-action TV series. My mom would strategically plan. I have a brother that's 1 year younger than me, and my mom would strategically plan our naps around the time when the Batman 66 TV show would come on. And so, as a toddler, I don't know how young I was. I was really young. But as a toddler, all the way to 1992, when I was 5 years old, I was very familiar with Batman already because I watched the Batman 66 live-action TV series. And then I can actually remember, as a little kid, learning that they were making an animated Batman show and getting really excited about it. And I remember watching it. It would come on after school. When I was in kindergarten, and when I was in kindergarten, I was homeschooled. So we would finish school and all that sort of thing, do my homework, and then I would I would get to watch cartoons in the afternoon, and part of that was Batman the Animated Series. So I imagine, I obviously don't have crystal clear memories of this, but I would watch it probably every single day, and I imagine I watched the whole TV series as a 5-year-old and was absolutely enthralled by it. And then, of course, I would watch it and rewatch it when it was on, and it was part of what led me to my Batman fandom, discovering Batman on film, writing on their message board, and then getting comic book recommendations, and then the rest is history. So I watched the Keaton films, on and on. So, but I would definitely say that now, as a comic book fan, and even rewatching these 2 episodes that we're about to discuss, I have a new level of appreciation for watching this series. And it's kind of cool to watch it with different eyes now that I'm a Batman fan with a lot of knowledge about the mythos and what makes Bruce Wayne tick. The meticulous care that Paul Dini and Bruce Timm put into the series and making sure that it was true to the spirit of Batman. So now as an adult, you know, I loved it when I was a kid. I treasure this series as an adult because I think it's probably the only thing that has got Batman like 100% right. You know, it's still a take on the character, but it's something that it's a Batman that I recognize from the comics. So for me, this show has a lot of special resonance in that way. And of course, it's still it was so successful, it still reverberates today, you know, almost 30 years later. A lot of the foundation of the DC animated movies that Warner Brothers releases come from, a lot of the foundation is from Batman the Animated Series. So yeah, that's kind of my background with the show.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll give a little bit of mine. I was 10 or 9 going on 10 when this show came on. And I remember vividly I remember the thing I can remember vividly is 2 things. The theme song and the opening intro, and you got to remember, this is coming off the heels of Batman Returns, which I loved. And so when I heard that theme, and I had no idea that an animated series was coming. When I heard that theme, I'm like, oh, you know, it's like when you ring a bell and a dog, you know, I can just compare myself to a dog. I'm okay with that. And, you know, it comes with, you know, and it was like, oh, here comes that theme. And like they had me at that. I thought it was okay. What is this? Something connected with the movie? And you know, obviously they played up on the popularity of the movie, and it was supposed to, you know, loosely be based on what, you know, the kind of thing Burton had set up. And then, you know, just watching it, I remember the first episode that I could vividly still remember seeing. Like I've seen them all back in the day too, but the one that I remember like almost being the first one I watched maybe was the introduction of Catwoman. And again, I think that was because it didn't air like the order wasn't, you know, the production order and the airing order was different. So I think that they aired the Catwoman episode relatively early on to capitalize on the Batman Returns sort of being out, you know, in the public eye and that sort of thing. So that's the one I remember the most. For me, like I said, this was my 3rd exposure to Batman, the first being 66 when I was really small. Like kindergarten age, that's when I used to watch the reruns of that. Again, probably my naps were also scheduled around that. And then Batman 89 really kicked it into another, you know, my Batman fandom into another stratosphere. And then this, but I hadn't picked up a Batman comic book until, 03, 04. It was probably my first time I picked up an actual Batman comic. So those 3 pieces of entertainment were, you know, my Batman, so to speak, in the lead up to my eventual reading comics. And like you, what I found, you know, nowadays is that the series really is the closest to the Batman we see in the comics. You know, it does take its own, you know, slant or look at things, but it is, you know, true to the characters, very respectful. I think this Gotham City and Burton's Gotham City are the 2 best iterations of Gotham City. Although I will give props to Schumacher's Gotham City. Actually, Schumacher's Gotham City kind of looks like this Gotham City, but with neon everywhere, like more neon.
Yeah.
Got to give Schumacher some props for that.
Yeah. think that Joel Schumacher's, you can disagree with his approach, but the set design was out of this world for that movie. Really,
and it's funny because
well.
when you see Arkham Asylum in the movie, it's like they transplanted the animated image from this and put it in. So you gotta give Schumacher props, and I still like Batman Forever.
Me too.
Throw stones all you want, but there it is. But yeah, so I love this show. I still love it to this day. I have lost count how many times I've watched it, in totality. But we've never quite watched it like this. And that's the interesting thing about doing this show is we're not watching it in the order that the DVD tells us to watch it. Because I was, funny enough, one day searching Batman the Animated Series, and mainly I was thinking about, should I buy, this McFarlane figure? Do I have room for it? And the debate is still raging on. Me and my wallet are having an argument, but I digress. And then I came across this. It's called a definitive viewing order, and it's made by a fan, and it comes from the article, the piece that sort of describes the list in detail is a comic book movie. So I got to give credit where credit is due. And the author of the piece is listed as M.G. Meadowstone. I don't know if that's a pseudonym or if it's his real name, but that sounds like a comic book name. So thumbs up to you. But
sounds very close to Wormwood.
Yeah,
sounds very similar to Wormwood.
It does, a little bit. And so what he's done is created a viewing order that provides each season with a specific theme, and also allows each season to function like a live action television series would function. It's got a more cohesive narrative. The first season he's organized, like the episodes. If you look at his list, like he's pulled episodes. One is from volume 1 of the DVDs. Another is from volume 2. Another is from volume. So it's all over. Like he's rearranging things. He's really curated this list in quite a detailed fashion. And God bless him for having the patience to do that, because I don't think I would have had the patience to do that. But the first season, just from glancing at the episodes that we're eventually going to cover, looks like they're more grounded, level villains. Before, and as each season goes on, we're going to get more of the fanciful, colorful villains and so on and so forth. So I really respected that take and him trying to make it more cohesive, more thematic, and also more like a live action series. So I said, you know what? This will be a new experience, so let's watch it like this. So that's what we're going to do. And the first, we're gonna do 2 episodes at a time. At least that's how we're going to start doing it. But the first 2 episodes that appear on the list are going to, so this is his version of season 1. Here we go. It's going to be the Cape and Cowl Conspiracy, and then we're going to review I've Got Batman in My Basement. So I don't, but obviously that's the end of the episode. I have
two random children in Gotham City do.
Yes, I have several Batman here in my room here, like statues and stuff. Not in the basement. So there it is. But all right, Josh. So the Cape and Cowl Conspiracy. What are some of your initial thoughts on this?
Yeah, I thought this episode was interesting to me for a number of reasons, but primarily looking at it from the lens of watching this series as a kid. I can't imagine that this episode would have held my attention as a kid. because of the level of maturity in the writing and the level of character work being done here is extremely impressive. But my initial sort of, you know, kind of and obviously we're going to do full spoilers here. So
yeah. I mean, it's been 1992, folks. If you haven't seen this thing,
yeah, or if you're rewatching, go watch it first and come back. But yeah, the Cape and Cowl, obviously the twist at the end where it's revealed that Wacklaw or Josic is actually been Batman the whole time.
Yeah,
is a really clever twist. I didn't see it coming. No, and I've seen this before somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
So I thought that was very interesting. I almost wondered if this was originally this was written by Elliot S. Madgen, and it's based on a comic book story that he wrote in the 1970s, and it was called The Cape and Cowl Death Trap in Detective Comics number 450 in August of 1975. So it was obviously based on a comic book story, but before I found that out, I almost wondered if this was originally intended to be the Riddler, and they thought there were some things that took them away from keeping it the Riddler. But I actually really like the Josiah Wormwood character. And before I was gonna get on here, I don't know if you're familiar with the works of C.S. Lewis, but yes, he wrote the Screw Tape Letters, and the nephew of the young demon character in that story is called Wormwood. So I was also wondering if he might have been based on that, if he might have pulled inspiration from C.S. Lewis. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed this. I think it makes sense that you would watch this first. The bat signal is introduced into the DCAU in this episode, and overall, I thought it's one of those episodes where I would encourage people, hang in there for 10 minutes. And it really ramps up and it really gets good. And it's not going to be a classic villain sort of Batman story, but it's a satisfying Batman story nonetheless. So yeah, that's what I think of it. What did you think of it, Adam?
It's funny because, like you, initially I'm like, ooh, this is a Riddler episode. Because, the way he wrote the clues, and the clues themselves, very Riddler. And then I'm like, it wasn't, I'm like, who is this guy? I'm like, wait a minute, who is this guy? And I'm like, is this guy in the comics? My comics knowledge doesn't go back to the 70s, so I don't know, maybe I'm missing something here, but who is this guy? But it wasn't the Riddler, but I'm like, yeah, I don't care that it's not the Riddler. I'm engrossed in what he's doing. And, the fact that he was able to, partially through Batman's allowing him to, but, you don't know that till the end. So the fact that he is able to capture Batman and get the Cape and Cowl, when I was watching it and having not remembered the episode at all, I was like, this guy, for an average whole-hum human who's doesn't seem overly insane like the Joker, Riddler, Penguin, etc., for him to be able to put Batman in this predicament is pretty impressive. But the fact that, like you said, Batman was I think this guy called himself the Baron as well. I think that's what he liked to call himself. That was his nickname.
Yes.
The Baron.
Yeah.
The fact that this guy was, Batman was the Baron the whole time, plays into Batman's use of disguises as a character. Like, if he's got to go undercover, you see he matches Malone a lot, right? So it plays into
Uh-huh.
that comic motif, and I'm like, I dig that because
Yeah.
rarely do we see that in live action,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah, and
love,
I
yeah,
oh, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
love that
Sorry.
I love that particular aspect of it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then the you're right, the introduction of the bat signal, I think is very important because this is clearly the first time it's being used, and that scene really gave me Batman Begins ending vibes. I'm like, look at this.
Yes.
This is totally, you know, I could see Batman Begins pulling from this for sure. Um,
Yeah.
and even like the interaction between Gordon and Batman on the rooftop, or in his office. I really dug that stuff because it's got
Mm-hmm.
Batman sort of just being there, and then all of a sudden he's gone, and you know the good thing about Batman the animated series is Gordon is very competent and he's not a buffoon,
Yeah.
uh, but at the same time Batman still has his number in terms of intelligence. Um,
Yes.
so and you see that here with the clues. Batman is quick to you know decipher the clue, and he's like, "Isn't that obvious?" Like,
Mm-hmm.
right. So
Mm-hmm.
I really liked that dynamic, and it really did um, make sense to watch this as a series opener, if you will, because it sets the table. Like it gives you, your main characters, Batman, Gordon. It shows you Gotham City. You
Mm-hmm.
get the bat signal. You know that Batman has been operating for a bit of time. You don't know exactly how long. It's very much like
Mm-hmm.
Batman '89 in that sense. So I think it works as a opener for sure. Um,
Yeah.
you're right. It is slow in parts, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the scene where Batman confronts the Baron for the first time, and then the end scene are really quite action packed. So, there is a little bit of a lull, but it's worth for the beginning and at the end there. Uh, I think it pulls it all together nicely. I think. Um,
Yeah, I think the thing that really worked for me in terms of what this gets right about Batman's character is that Batman is always going to be two steps ahead of everybody, right?
yeah,
Or three steps ahead of everybody. You can always count on that. Now, sometimes that expectation is subverted, like in the Court of the Owls storyline in the comics. It's like that's a really interesting story because the Court of the Owls are two or three steps ahead of Batman, and
yeah,
that throws him off. He doesn't know how to handle that, you know.
yeah. No, he doesn't
But
like that.
yeah, but Batman is always two or three steps ahead of everybody. He is one of the smartest men in the room, which is why I think that despite the fact that he's a Superman villain, I think Lex Luthor is a great villain for Batman too, because it's a match of wits between the two of them.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that's an aside, but
And when that match of wits fails, there's always the money battle. Who's richer?
yes. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But there was that interesting dynamic
Yeah,
there. And
yeah,
I think anytime you can highlight Batman's intelligence and his wit, it really the reason this works is it's part of the reason why this works is the first episode because it really sets Batman up as sort of a force to be reckoned with in Gotham City. It makes you go, "Oh wow, this guy's formidable."
yeah,
you know whatever challenges he's facing
yeah.
later on, that he's a very formidable guy. So I really appreciated that about this episode.
You can almost sort of, it makes the viewer, if you're watching this, in this format in this, order for the first time, you really get a sense of, okay, to beat Batman, somebody's really going to have to be the epitome of villainhood because, they've got to have the physicality to beat him
Mm-hmm.
and the smarts. And
Yes.
that's a tough. Not many can do that. So
Yeah.
there are a few, but it really shows how adept and how qualified Batman is, and so I enjoyed that too. Now I wanted to get your opinion on something because I noticed it as I was watching. Obviously, we've talked about the comparisons to Batman '89 and the Burton world, but did you notice that in certain areas the music cue would go into that little '66 playful vibe?
Oh yeah.
And then and then it would turn itself back around to more Elfman kind of stuff. But there was always that little kind of few bars of music that would go in the '66 direction, and I think that was a nice nod.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also the death traps that Batman had to face were things that you'd probably find in the '66. That you could imagine the writers for the '66 show could dream up. So I think those were nods to that era as well, and I like that. I like that little touch of.
I like that too because this is probably the height of, there were Batman animated series in the '70s and '80s, but none of them had the cultural renaissance that this did. And that's largely due to the Burton films. But the last time that Batman had the cultural renaissance that he did of the Burton films was in the '60s. A lot of people don't remember this, but the Batman comics were about to be canceled because they weren't popular. They kind of had been burning out in popularity through the early '60s, and the Batman '66 TV series actually rescued the Batman comics.
It's true.
And it had a couple of seasons of that, and then the funny thing is, the ironic thing is, you had sort of the campiness of the '60s series. Immediately after the '60s series was when Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams started, making their way into writing Batman. And Batman, I would assume, in an attempt to sort of compete with Marvel, started becoming a little bit more socially conscious, a little bit more realistic, a little bit darker. They kind of moved away from the camp. And then as Batman got into the '70s, it went full on the Dark Knight that we know today.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't give, and it relates to this episode because this episode comes from a 1975 comic, which was 17 years before this episode. A lot of people credit Frank Miller for making Batman dark, but Batman was dark way before that. Batman was dark in the 1970s, and a lot of credit goes to Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams for, amongst other people. I can't name them off the top of my head, but they were definitely sort of the spearheads of making Batman darker. And a lot of the Adam, the '60s, the nods to the '60s series, and nods to the sort of Denny O'Neil era of Batman are going to be recurring themes on the show, because the Burton films obviously are the major inspiration for the show, but they also pull inspiration from that '70s era and from the '60s series, because those are the things that people are familiar with Batman.
Yeah. No, you're definitely right about the '60s show, and I got to be honest with you, I don't want to live in a world where Batman comics don't exist and Batman wasn't popular. I don't know, but if that's a multiverse that I don't want to live in. So if that alternate future ever happens, it's just I'm checking out.
No, Adam, what you do if you get into that alternate universe is you revive Batman for DC Comics.
Yeah, all right.
And say, hey, I know that this is a long shot, but you should revive Batman, and it would be a huge hit.
And here are the books.
Here's the story, The Long Halloween.
Yeah, here. I'll just play it. Nobody will fault me for plagiarizing, because they'll all want to give me keys to the city for bringing Batman back. That's what'll happen. No, yeah, and I really, just hearing you sort of give some details on Daniel Neal and Neil Adams, I really got to go back and do a deep dive of
Oh
that
yeah.
era. A lot of them are on Comixology, so I think I may, next time there's a big DC sale, I'm just gonna stock up and dive right in.
Swoop them up, and AT&T make DC Universe Infinite available in Canada.
That I think is coming.
Goodness sake.
I think that's coming. That's coming later in the summer.
Good.
It's just like the HBO Max, like that we have to get through other, like either Netflix or Crave or But yeah, but DC Infinite I'll be able to get, and if not, Comixology, you can have my money. That's fine. Just give me the issues that I want, and then we'll make an exchange. But so, is there anything you want to specifically mention that we haven't about this episode, or else we can rate it and move on to the second one?
No, I think that we've covered it. I think that the first episode that aired, at least in the U.S., I don't know if it was the same in Canada, was On Leather Wings. It was the Man Bat episode, and I can totally see why they would air that episode first.
Yeah.
Because it features a Batman villain that's lesser known but still fantastical. I think that I was impressed with the maturity of this episode, with the writing of this episode, with how adult the story is, and as an adult, I really enjoyed it. I don't know how much a 7-year-old would enjoy this, but who knows? Maybe I'm underestimating 7-year-olds. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they're more adept at sitting through things now. Who knows?
Yeah.
Somehow, I think most of them would just be looking into their tablet or whatever.
Yeah.
The device is at their ready. But yeah, no, I enjoyed it, and this episode totally works as a series premiere, in my opinion. So let's do a rating, I guess, out of 5.
Okay.
So what would you give this episode?
I would give this series a solid 4. I think it's really well done. It has a great twist, and it really highlights Batman's character in a way that I think is serviceable to the character. So I give it a 4.
Yeah, for me it's the same, 4 to 5. Again, it sets the groundwork. It lets you know everything you need to know. Shows you how formidable Batman is as both, in both getting things done in terms of intimidating his adversaries and physically overpowering them, but the way he mentally, tricks them and uses disguises that are not Batman to foil them. I think that seeing that really put a smile on my face, because it's so rarely, like in comics it's done, but in other media, it's so rarely done that when I saw it here, I'm like, that's just refreshing. So, yeah, 4 to 5, and the animation was top-notch. The soundtrack for this episode was top-notch. It all just came together quite well. So, not a full perfect episode, but pretty darn close.
And I will say, Adam, there are going to be some 5s.
Absolutely.
Throughout this retrospective,
yeah.
so
it's not like 5. Yeah.
It's not like 5 is an. Oh yeah. It's not like 5 is an unattainable number.
Oh, definitely not for this show. No. Perfect. All right, so on to episode 2. I've got Batman in my basement. So, Josh, what did you think of this one?
So, in my head, executives from Fox Kids, which is the network that aired Batman the Animated Series in the early 90s in the US, met with executives from Warner Brothers, and they basically said, hey, we need an episode where some kids interact with Batman, because this is a show for kids. So write an episode where Batman's interacting with kids. And then the executives from Warner Brothers went back to the animation team and said, we need an episode of Batman the Animated Series where Batman interacts with kids. Oh, and also Penguin is going to be the villain in the latest movie. So see if you can put Penguin in there somehow.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's kind of the I would have to guess that that's the origin of this episode.
Yeah.
Because of the plot's a little bit random for me.
Yeah.
It's these kids kind of come across Batman, and Batman saves them, and Batman gets knocked out, and he takes them back. The kids take him back home, and then the Penguin tries to come back and defeat Batman.
At their house. Yeah.
At their house. A little random, but I think that it's very difficult for this team to sort of strike out. Because I thought that some of the stuff in this episode was really well done. I think that obviously the design of the Penguin, he's got the 3 flippers, he's got the long hair, he's bald. It's based on Danny DeVito, right?
Yeah.
But it's definitely, obviously animation takes very long to produce. And it's very likely that when they wrote these episodes and when they animated them, they actually hadn't seen Danny DeVito's depiction of Penguin, and which is for the better, because the characterization of the Penguin in this show is much closer to the comics characterization.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So, the Penguin from the comics is a much better character, in my opinion, than the Penguin from the Batman Returns. So it's our first interaction with a supervillain that we're coming across. But yeah, for me, this is kind of mixed. I think that it's sort of there's the I'm just like reading an overview of the episode, and there's the Fabergé egg. That's in the episode that that penguin tries to steal. So there's a lot happening in this episode, and for me, the last episode was very adult. This to me is very much aimed at kids, and as an adult, I kind of lost my interest. I logged on to Postmates and kind of was looking at what I could order for dinner. So
yeah.
That's kind of where I was at. What did you think of it?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the Penguin. I looked at it, obviously the flipper design, right, is very much DeVito. A lot of the design is DeVito. But it does have, he looks like a hybrid of DeVito meets Burgess Meredith.
Yes.
And I wonder, because I could be misremembering this, but I remember either watching an interview with Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, or reading an interview where they said that they had gotten a look at images of concept art of what Danny DeVito was going to look like. And I think somebody at the animation studio said, keep some of it to keep connections to the movie, but make him look more, pleasing to, the kids. Because, and then we know what happened afterwards. Parent groups were not pleased with the black goo spewing, raunchy dialogue, which I find funny watching Batman Returns as an adult now. Now I'm picking up on all that. I'm like, wait a minute. Did he just say what I think he did? And sure enough, he did. But, back then I could see how those...
Let's just say that Mayor Oswald Cobblepot would have a lot of Me Too moments.
He would be canceled by now, for sure. Without question. No doubt about it. But yeah, so I think the studio was kind of like, okay, keep some elements to make it, similar, but let's steer away from the thing. We don't want to scare our core audience. In terms of writing an episode with kids in it, you're probably bang on. That's probably you could have just read off a transcript, and that was probably it of how the conversation went. I did like, and You mentioned the Fabergé egg. I think that egg was in an episode of Batman 66 as well.
Mm. Yeah.
Probably involving Egghead is my guess, but I'm pretty sure that egg was in Batman 66.
I think that you are correct.
Um,
Yeah.
So that was a cool nod, or at least one that I think is a nod. And I got to be honest, the part of the episode that I did like was Batman rescuing the kids when they get in trouble.
Yeah.
Because, like in the first episode, we see a Batman who, intimidates his adversaries, to the point of hanging them off the edge of a building to, scare the crap out of them. So to kind of, he's showing a monstrous side of himself to the criminals he fights, but to kind of also humanize him at the same time, showing him rescuing the kids in such a heroic way, puts the superhero aspect of Batman, right? Whereas the first episode was more The Dark Knight, this is more superhero Batman, if you will. If you get where I'm going with that. So I did like that rescue. Him being knocked out for days by the gas, and the kids taking him home, and the kids riding for God's sake, they drove the Batmobile. It's like, and don't get me wrong, I'll take any opportunities to see the Batmobile, and the animated series version of the Batmobile is a nice Batmobile. I love it, but I don't need to see kids drive it. And then the part where the Penguin attacks at their house with his two goons, it felt, I may be wrong here, but when they were coming up with the concept for this episode, somebody must have watched Home Alone and said, "This is a good idea."
Yeah, that's a good point. After they had the meeting with the Fox and W,
they're like, "Crap, what are we gonna do?" Someone's like, "Oh, don't worry. Over the weekend, I just saw Home Alone. We just put that in there, and nobody say nothing." Because as I was watching it this time around, I'm like, "Wait a minute, this is Home Alone." With Batman, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a good thing either. It's somewhere in the middle, like you were alluding to. So it just felt very much like, it almost was like the John Peters school of decision making, where, okay, we need an episode to appeal to kids. Check. What's the latest thing I've seen in theaters? Home Alone. Check. And that's how it seems like this episode came about, because having the kids beat the Penguin Batman shows up at the end and has a Zorro kind of sword fight with Penguin. He's using his umbrella, and Batman's using, I think it was some sort of tool. So yeah, and again, I'm taking it as a nod to Zorro, because Batman was inspired by Zorro, so that little sword fight thing was my kind of, they're making a reference to that. I got to put a positive spin on that, because otherwise that fight was lacking. But essentially, the kids took out Penguin and the goons. So it didn't do Penguin as a character any favors, I don't think. So yeah, it was a really mixed bag for me this episode. I don't hate it. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either.
Yeah, I feel the same. In fact, I'm probably on the for me it's on the low end of mediocre. Personally, I'm kind of glad though that we're watching it now.
I'm glad it's over with.
Before we build up momentum, because there are some really great episodes coming down the pike. So
absolutely,
I'm really excited.
Without question. So I really don't have much else to say about this episode. I don't know about you.
Me neither. I do want to just say something sort of in general about the series that I think is really interesting to note. I think that it was Scott Snyder that I heard say that, because he's written both Detective Comics and Batman, the main Batman title, and he said the difference for him is Detective Comics are sort of it's sort of the grounded detective stories. It's sort of the street level Batman stories, and then the main Batman title is Superhero Batman. It's like the big Batman stories. It's like, you know, and for me, what I love about Batman the Animated Series is it's sort of the Detective Comics approach to Batman. It's the sort of ground level stories, and so, you know, this to me is kind of, you know, if you look at it as the Cape and Cowl Conspiracy is the main chunk of Detective Comics number, you know, 670 or whatever. I've got Batman in my basement is probably like the backup story, like the fun random backup story.
I would even call it like it's like a fill-in issue of Batman. You know, like when they're in transition between creative teams.
Yeah.
And they have a guy come in and tell just, you know, a filler story.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this episode feels like.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah, no, that's a really good take on the two different titles. And Scott Snyder's a smart man, and his Batman work has been it was exceptional.
I love how he started very grounded with the Black Mirror, and it was a total. And that was
Dick Grayson as Batman, correct?
Yes, it was, which is fantastic, by the way. I'm kind of bummed that they ended it, but they, you know, they went from Grant Morrison, who was telling these like bonkers stories, to that were amazing as well. But they went back grounded to Scott Snyder.
Yeah.
And then over the course of the decade that Scott Snyder's been writing DC stories, he's basically transformed into Grant Morrison himself. He's telling bonkers DC stories.
The death metal stuff.
Yeah.
To me, the best way to approach that is you've got to read it once the story is fully complete. You can't read that stuff as a monthly periodical. You can't. At least I can't.
Yeah.
I mean, God bless anybody that can and keep it straight. I'm clearly not there. But yeah, Scott's done some amazing work. And funny, you should actually, you know what? Let's rate the episode, and then I'll bring it back around to Scott. So out of 5, what would you rate this episode?
I'm really sorry to the creative team that wrote this, Sam Graham and Chris Hubble, and it was directed by Frank Parr. But I'm gonna have to give this episode a 2 out of 5.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah, I'm gonna be as generous as I can here, and I'm gonna give it a 2.5. Only because I'll tell you where it gets the extra 0.5. I didn't like the kids driving the Batmobile, but I got an extended Batmobile chase. So for that, you get the extra 0.5.
There you go. There you go.
Look, it's still better than Batman and Robin, so there's that.
It's true, yeah.
And Catwoman, so you're not the worst DC media out there. So that's A+. So take that to heart. You didn't screw the pooch on Batman completely. That's reserved for other people. But so I just to tie something Scott Snyder related to Batman the Animated Series. Josh, have you had a chance to read the comics, Batman, The Adventures Continue, the digital form?
You know what? I've read the first few. Issues. I read the first few issues with Lex Luthor as the villain, actually.
Yeah, the first couple. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Are you digging those? Have you dug those so far?
I dug what I've read so far. So I have DC Universe Infinite now. So I need to actually go through because I think those come for free with it. I think they release when they release on
at a certain point. Yeah, they become free. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so there's two things to this. What we might do in between seasons is look at some of those comics. You know,
I think that's a good idea.
And the other thing I wanted to mention is season 1 of Batman: The Adventures Continue ends at issue 17. Season 2 is starting up in like I want to say May, but I'm not 100% sold on that. Okay. Season 2 of Batman: The Adventures Continue is starting up around May-ish. And the first story arc is their adaptation of The Court of Owls. So I just
it's
their take
that's
on
exciting.
So
hey, Adam, there's also the rumors. We might have to discuss it on a future show. Might have to do a special episode. But there are rumors that HBO Max is going to revive Batman the Animated Series, which would just make me
if it is,
so
we're going to be doing this a lot more often. I'll tell you that right now. We're going to be covering live episodes and not 30-year-old episodes. But listen, I'll be over the moon if that. Please, I know I don't have HBO Max. I'll get it. I'll be able to watch. They'll make a deal with somebody, Netflix or whoever, so I'll be able to watch it. But please do that. Like the inner 10-year-old and the 37-year-old in me are both screaming, please. I mean, listen, the last year and a half has been a pile of junk for the most part. Give us this joyous news. I would welcome that with open arms. And we'll definitely keep.
Hashtag restore the Diniverse.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna. You may be joking, but I'm gonna get that started. We will. If we hear anything, we'll of course cover it when that news comes around. And like you said, we'll come up with a plan to cover some of those Batman: The Adventures Continue comics at some point. Yeah, like I said, in between seasons for like an episode 2, we'll kind of do a story arc of the comic. We'll figure it out. But this was our first episode. I hope you enjoyed it, Josh. I certainly did.
I did as well.
I hope the viewers and listeners, whichever way they're consuming this, enjoyed it and will continue to join us for the future episodes. Josh, I don't know if you have the list up still. What are our next 2 episodes?
I will tell you right now. Hold on, give me 1 second.
I should have kept it up.
Oh, goodness. Okay, hold on. We are going to be covering next time The Last Laugh. So it'll be our first Joker episode, and Night of the Ninja, which I'm really excited about. That sounds like a cool episode.
Based off the title, I don't remember that one. I can say so. That'll be an interesting rewatch. But that will bring the episode to a close. But if you want to talk more Batman the Animated Series, Batman in general, or anything DC with Josh or I, you can on social media. So Josh, where do they find you if they want to keep the conversation going?
Yeah, you can follow me on at Josh Loves This, the name of another podcast I'm going to be starting here in the near term future. I also guest on various podcasts around fandom. So if you follow me at Josh Loves This, I'll let you know where I'm appearing. But I'll be appearing on this podcast whenever we do it. So I'm really excited.
Yes. Awesome. And if you want to follow me and continue the Batman conversation, you can. There are multiple ways to do that. It's at Adam_LeadsFan on Twitter, which is my personal account. There's at MMNPDC, which is the podcast-centric Twitter account. There, I'll post the episodes. I mean, I'll post them on mine too, but typically that's mostly here. I post the episode, enjoy it. But if you want to talk with me on there, follow that one, and I can easily switch accounts and talk to you there, whichever suits you. We also have a Facebook page, the Multiverse Musings Podcast Network page. Go there, ask for permission to join the group. I'll add you, and we can gladly continue the conversation there as well. But that's it. That brings this first inaugural episode to a close. We had fun, and we will be back next episode. But until then, how can I end this show? Be sure to join us next time. Same bad time, same bad channel. Yes, I know I stole it from the 60s show, but it's all Batman. It's all good. And remember, and I'll use one of my. I know Steven's already wondering what I'm going to say. My classic catchphrase for the end of our other episodes. Batman the Animated Series is forever, from the first episode to the last. So long, everybody.